Seoul in Seoul. Episode 3. Kang Entertainment. Scene 1. The Kang Entertainment Tower does not announce itself the way lesser buildings do. It does not require signage at eye level or floodlights along the base or any of the thousand small architectural vanities that corporations use to remind pedestrians of their own insignificance. It occupies the Seoul skyline the way a declaration occupies a room, not as an addition to the landscape, but as a correction of it, a statement that everything that existed on this block before it was merely the rough draft. 42 floors of pale stone and floor-to-ceiling glass, the letters K and E rendered in brushed platinum near the roofline at a scale visible from the Han River on a clear night, and they're always visible. Because the building has its own lighting system designed by an architect in Zurich whose only brief was to ensure that Kang Entertainment was never in darkness. The lobby is the kind of space that manages silence actively. There is no echo. There is no ambient clutter. The stone floors are polished to a mirror finish that reflects the overhead lighting in long, cold ribbons, and the reception desk, white marble, seamless, 6 meters wide, sits at the center of it all like an altar in a church whose god is commerce. The women at the desk are impeccably beautiful in the particular way that Kang Entertainment cultivates beauty, not warm, not accessible, but precise. Architectural. The kind of beautiful that is also, unmistakably, a message about who belongs here and who is merely visiting and who has wandered in by accident and will be directed back toward the street with graceful, efficient speed. The 41st floor is where the real business happens, not the business of albums and showcase events and carefully managed artist debuts, but the business underneath that business. The one conducted in long rooms with long tables and very good coffee and lawyers whose entire careers have been built on their capacity for creative interpretation of binding language. The boardroom is at the corner, which means 2 walls of glass, which means the Seoul skyline on 3 sides like an endorsement, and Ji-Hoon Kang has arranged his chair so that when he sits at the head of the table, the city is always behind him, always illuminated. Always providing the backdrop of scale that makes everything he says feel irrefutable. He is reviewing a file. The file is slim, 8 pages, tabbed, printed on matte stock because Ji-Hoon Kang does not read from screens when the matter is important, and he considers every matter important enough to print, and it carries no name on the cover. This is his practice. Names personalize. Personalization introduces sentiment. Sentiment is the enemy of good business decisions, and Ji-Hoon Kang has never made a bad business decision in his professional life, which is a claim supported by 12 consecutive years of quarterly growth and an artist roster that spans 4 continents and a legal department that has settled every dispute it has ever encountered without a single verdict reaching public record. The file contains everything. This is not a figure of speech. It contains her name, her age, her hometown, her immigration status, her visa classification, and the date she arrived at Incheon. It contains a printout of every social media post she has made in the last 3 years, sorted by engagement rate, with a highlight on the 2 that went internationally viral, the rooftop session that reached 400,000 views in 72 hours, the studio fragment that circulated through K-pop fan communities with a speed that suggested genuine crossover potential. It contains a vocal range assessment prepared by one of Kang Entertainment's senior A&R consultants based on publicly available recordings, rating her across 12 technical categories and noting in the summary section that her tone quality is rare, the kind of natural warmth that cannot be coached into a voice, that either lives there from the beginning or is simply absent. There is a section on marketability, a section on international positioning, a section on competitor interest, flagging 2 other Seoul-based labels who have made informal contact. Sungwoo does not see a woman when he reads this file. He sees a frequency, a very specific, very valuable frequency that his company's international division has been trying to develop for 18 months, An R&B-rooted sound with the authentic emotional depth that K-pop production currently lacks and that Western markets are actively hungry for. He sees a gap and a solution to the gap. He sees an asset that has not yet been acquired, priced, or positioned, which means it is still in the rare and temporary state of being available. And Seung-woo Kang understands better than almost anyone alive that available does not mean available forever. He signs the authorization without looking up. He hands the folder to the assistant standing at his right shoulder, who has been standing at his right shoulder for 22 minutes without shifting weight or making a sound, because this, too, is what Kang Entertainment cultivates in the people closest to its center. He says something brief in Korean. The assistant takes the folder and leaves the room. The machine, which is very large and very well-oiled and has been running without interruption for over a decade, begins to move. Scene 2. The envelope. The envelope sits on the cafe table for 4 minutes before Ari opens it. She knows this because she can see the clock above the counter from where she is sitting, and she watches it without meaning to, the way you watch something when you are using it to avoid watching something else. The envelope is cream-colored, heavy stock, and the K is pressed into the wax seal at the back in a font so clean and so confident that the elegance of it feels like a threat, the kind of threat that knows it is beautiful. That has been designed to be beautiful precisely so that the part of you that recognizes danger is briefly confused by the part of you that recognizes beauty. The Kang Entertainment seal catches the light in the cafe window and holds it for a moment like gold. Min-Seo has not touched her coffee in 4 minutes. She keeps looking at the envelope and then at Ari and then back at the envelope, in the rapid and involuntary cycle of a woman who has opinions she is forcibly containing because she has been told, with significant emphasis, to let Ari do this at her own pace. Min-Seo's version of letting someone do something at their own pace involves her hands wrapped around her mug, her shoulders slightly raised, and a very specific quality of quiet that is nothing like her usual quiet, which is comfortable and warm. This quiet is taut. This quiet has an edge. Ari picks it up. She turns it over once in her hands, feeling the weight of it, the paper, the contents, the meaning of what it represents to have a Kang Entertainment contract delivered to you personally, hand-couriered, to a cafe table in Haedae at 9:30 in the morning. Then she breaks the seal. She reads slowly. This is not her natural pace. Ari Washington is a fast reader, always has been, the kind of person who takes in a paragraph in a single long visual sweep, but the language in the document requires something more careful, more deliberate. The kind of attention that parses not just what the words say, but how they have been arranged to guide your understanding away from what they mean. She turns pages. She goes back. She reads a clause on page 4 a second time, and then a third time, her full lips pressed together in the expression that Min-Seo knows is concentration but looks, to everyone else, like calm. The contract offers everything she came to Seoul for. It is thorough in this, almost lovingly so, as though someone who understood her specific desires had designed it with the specific intention of addressing each one. A full recording deal. Studio access beginning within 30 days, distribution across 17 Asian markets and 3 Western streaming territories, international promotional support through Kang Entertainment's established media partnerships, a development budget for a debut EP, coaching in Korean for media appearances. The numbers are generous. The signing bonus is a figure that sits in Ari's chest like a stone and a door opening at the same time, because it is exactly what she would need to send money home to Atlanta and still build a life here, and whoever assembled this offer knows that. But the language. The language is where it lies, the thing she keeps circling back to, the thing that feels, on first pass, like standard legal caution and on third pass like the architecture of a cage. The exclusivity provisions span territories and formats and ancillary rights in a way that would mean Kang Entertainment owns not just her recordings, but her voice, the legal use of it, in any medium, for the full term plus 5 years of rollover. The creative approval clauses are nested inside language about artistic direction and market positioning that effectively mean every song she writes, every sonic choice she makes, every visual presentation of her own image requires sign-off from a committee she has never met. The penalties for early termination are structured in 3 tiers, each more crippling than the last, in amounts that would take the rest of her working life to clear. Min-Seo reads over her shoulder. She does not say anything. This is the most alarming part. Min-Seo Park, who has an audible opinion about every menu, every weather forecast, every peripheral character in every television drama she has ever watched, says absolutely nothing. She reads and she is silent, and her silence sits between them on the table with the same weight as the contract, which is its own form of alarm louder than any words she could have chosen. Ari sets the contract down. She looks out the cafe window at the Hongdae street, the morning foot traffic, the delivery scooters, the students with oversized coffee cups, and the street vendor setting up a taekbokki cart at the corner. The whole ordinary moving world of Seoul doing what it always does, which is continue, indifferent to the particular weight of any given moment happening inside any given window. She thinks about Atlanta. She thinks about the label there, the one that had loved her voice and owned everything she made with it, and had still, at the end, found it easy to let her go when a shinier, safer option arrived. She thinks about a man in a black coat who stopped her on a rainy Hongdae street before she even had a name to attach to the feeling of warning. She thinks about his face and the particular stillness of it and the way his silver watch had caught the streetlight, and she had thought, before she knew enough to think anything else, that he was the most quietly beautiful person she had ever seen. She picks up the contract again. She does not sign it, but she does not put it away. Scene 3. He finds out. Ji-Hoon finds out the way he finds out most things Sung-woo does not want him to know, through a channel his brother forgot to close. A contact whose loyalty runs older and deeper than the organizational chart Sung-woo has constructed around him with such meticulous care. The message arrives on his phone at 7:43 in the morning. He is standing in the corridor outside the Kang Entertainment executive offices, still in his coat, having come in early as he often does, not from diligence exactly, but from the specific habit of a man who finds the building more manageable before the rest of it is populated, before the corridors fill with people who look at him and see the family name first and the person inside it, if at all, at a considerable distance behind. He reads the message. It is brief. The contract has been sent. Not a standard development deal, the other kind. His brother's kind. The kind with the particular clause structures that Sung-woo uses when he intends to own something completely and permanently, and with no room for the artist inside it to ever fully understand what they agreed to until the understanding no longer changes anything. The physical experience of Ji-Hoon reading this message is a study in the discipline that 29 years inside the Kang family has produced. His face does not change. His breathing does not audibly change. There is a stillness that falls over him, not the stillness of shock, because he is not shocked, because some part of him has known since the night in Hongdae that his brother's information network would eventually deliver this woman's name to the 41st floor. But the stillness of a man making a very rapid series of calculations behind a face specifically trained to reveal none of them. His jaw sets. His silver watch catches the corridor light as his hand tightens around the phone 1 second, the pressure precise and contained, and then deliberately, consciously releases. Because Ji-Hoon Kang has spent 29 years learning that the most dangerous thing a man in his position can do is show his hand before he has counted all the cards still in play. He knows this contract. He has read it in its various iterations across the last 5 years. He knows the exclusivity provisions and the approval clauses and the 3-tier termination penalties, and he knows something that is not contained in any of the contract's language, but that is its true architecture. That the artists who sign it rarely emerge from it as the artists they were when they walked in. They emerge technically fulfilled, their recordings made, their singles released, their images managed, but something essential has been smoothed away in the process, something that was the actual source of whatever made them worth signing in the first place. Kang Entertainment is very good at this. It is one of the things Sungwoo is most proud of and most careful never to describe accurately in any public context. He has stood by once. This is the fact that lives at the center of the room inside him with no window. The room he visits at 3 in the morning when the building is empty and the Seoul skyline is a field of cold light and there is nothing between him and what he knows about himself except the distance of 5 years and the fact that he was 24 and still learning. Still uncertain, still telling himself that the family empire was something other than what it turned out, in every meaningful way, to be. He watched it happen once because Sungwoo told him it was business. He watched it happen once because he did not yet have the language for what he was seeing, only the sensation of it, the particular nausea of witnessing something that cannot be unwitnessed, that goes into the permanent record of a person's understanding of themselves whether they want it there or not. He did not stand by twice. He does not intend to stand by a third time. He puts his phone in his pocket. He straightens his coat, a single, minimal adjustment, the gesture of a man settling himself before a deliberate action, and he begins to walk down the corridor. Not fast. There is no urgency in his pace that anyone watching could identify as such. But there is direction and there is certainty, and in the vocabulary of Ji-Hoon Kang, these things are everything. Scene 4. Brothers at War. The rooftop of the Kang Tower at night is a specific kind of cold, the kind that comes not from temperature, but from altitude and power and the particular loneliness of men who have built walls so high and so well that warmth cannot find the summit. The wind moves across it without obstruction. The Seoul skyline extends in every direction, glittering and vast and indifferent, the Han River a dark ribbon to the south, the mountains a suggestion behind the glow. The thousands of apartment windows blinking like a field of stars that has collapsed to the horizon. It is beautiful in the way that power is always beautiful from a sufficient distance, without context, without consequence, without the view from inside any particular window. Ji-Hoon is already there when Sungwoo arrives. He is standing at the northeast corner with his hands in his coat pockets and his back to the door, looking out at the city, which means he heard the door open and chose not to turn, which means he chose the ground, chose the posture, chose the particular frame of this conversation before his brother had even crossed the threshold. Sungwoo notes this. He files it with the attention of a man who understands that even the smallest choices in a Kang family confrontation are strategic, and that his brother has become, slowly and without announcement, considerably more strategic than he was 5 years ago. What happens next is not an explosion. This is important to understand about the Kang brothers. They do not explode, either of them, because they were raised in a house where volume was the province of people who had already lost. And they absorbed this lesson the way children absorb everything their environment teaches them, completely, permanently, in the bones. What happens instead is a controlled pressure, 2 men standing 6 feet apart on a rooftop 42 floors above the city they both grew up in, conducting an argument that has been running for 5 years at a volume that would not disturb a sleeping child in the next room. The argument is about a contract. It is about a woman from Atlanta whose voice found its way into both of their orbits through entirely different doorways. But underneath the contract and underneath the woman, underneath all of it, at the very foundation of what they are really saying to each other, the argument is about a 22-year-old singer from Busan whose name Sungwoo does not use, whose career Kang Entertainment ended, and whose silence has been maintained for 5 years by a non-disclosure agreement with penalties that constitute the 3rd tier of a document Ji-Hoon could quote from memory. Ji-Hoon does not shout. He speaks in the controlled, level register of a man who has practiced this conversation in the private theater of his own mind many times. The precise economy of language that has been honed by years of watching his brother use precision the way other people use force. He makes the argument clearly. The contract is the same contract. The American woman is a working artist with her own vision, her own creative history, her own reasons for being in Seoul that have nothing to do with being acquired and reshaped and sent back into the market as a Kang Entertainment product. He uses the word destroyed. He uses it once, and he does not look away when he does. Sung-woo listens. He listens with the full, courteous attention of a man who finds his younger brother charming in the way that one finds a well-trained animal charming, with appreciation, with something close to affection, and without any functional concern. He has heard this argument before, or versions of it. He knows its structure. He knows where it is going before it arrives. When Ji-Hoon finishes, Sung-woo is quiet for a moment, the specific pause of a man who is not formulating his response, but deciding which of the several responses he has already formulated is the one that will be most instructive. Then he says one sentence. Quietly. The way he says everything. The rooftop goes very still around it. The city continues below them, indifferent and luminous, in the way that cities always continue, as though the particular gravity of any given moment, no matter how dense, cannot change the orbit of anything larger than itself. Scene 5. Min-Seo digs deep. Min-Seo Park did not move back to Seoul to become an investigative journalist. She moved back because her grandmother was aging and her Korean was getting rusty, and because Atlanta, after 26 years, had begun to feel like a coat she had outgrown. Comfortable still in the sense of familiarity, but slightly wrong across the shoulders, slightly abbreviated in the sleeves, the kind of fit that reminds you, if you pay attention, that you have been growing in directions the coat did not anticipate. She is sitting at her desk at 2:11 in the morning with 3 browser tabs open, a cold cup of coffee she has twice forgotten to drink, and the particular quality of alertness that is Min-Seo in full investigative mode, which is very alert, very thorough, and absolutely not going to stop until she has turned over every last piece of what she is looking at and examined the underside of it. She starts with Kang Entertainment's public history. The Wikipedia page, the official company timeline, the Financial Times profile from 3 years ago. The Billboard Korea feature on Ji-Hoon Kang that ran 18 months back and is very flattering and very careful and tells her almost nothing of real use except that Ji-Hoon Kang has never once given an interview in which he was caught off guard, which is itself a kind of information. She moves to the financial reporting, the annual statements filed with the Korea Exchange, the subsidiary structures, the international licensing revenue, the Artist Development Division budget, which is substantial enough to be significant and opaque enough in its categorization to suggest it is doing something more varied than its label implies. She finds the artist development roster. She finds the list of currently signed artists, 17 names, 6 of them internationally positioned, 2 of them recognizable even to Min-Seo's admittedly K-pop adjacent level of industry knowledge. And then she finds the formerly signed roster, which requires a different kind of searching. The kind that goes into archived industry databases and old entertainment news sites and the comment sections of fan forums where people with long memories and strong opinions have been keeping records that no official source has ever had any incentive to compile. 12 artists terminated in the last 8 years. Termination rates in artist development run high across the industry. Min-Seo knows this. She is not naive. But 12 is a pattern, and the pattern has a shape, and the shape is specifically this. All 12 artists signed with significant fanfare. All 12 released at least one single under the Kang Entertainment label, and all 12 exited the roster within 18 months of signing with non-disclosure agreements that appear in court filings as sealed exhibits, their contents protected, their existence visible as the faintest outline of something substantial. The non-disclosure agreements are public record in the sense that their existence cannot be hidden, only their contents. And Min-Seo is very good at reading the shape of a sealed document. She has been doing it since she was a journalism minor at Georgia State, writing a feature on municipal contract redaction that her professor said was the best investigative piece he had seen from an undergraduate in 7 years. The shape of these NDAs says, "We are not simply managing contractual exits." The shape says, "There is something in these endings that cannot survive daylight." Then she finds the name. It is not sealed. It is not hidden. It is simply old enough that no one has thought to search for it recently. A 22-year-old singer from Busan who signed with Kang Entertainment 5 years ago, whose debut single generated significant pre-release industry buzz, whose recording sessions were documented in 3 separate entertainment news pieces that are still archived and accessible if you know where to look, and who went completely silent 18 months after signing. No second single. No label statement. No public interview. No fan communication. No social media beyond a single post 3 years after her exit, a short paragraph, soft-voiced and careful, saying only that she had chosen to leave music and that she wished everyone who had supported her well and that she was grateful for everything she had experienced. The post has 942 comments. Min-Seo reads all of them. She reads the pre-signing interviews, a woman with a 3-octave range and an enormous, uncomplicated joy about her own voice, talking about the songs she wanted to make, the story she wanted to tell. The feeling of being 22 and finally standing at the beginning of the thing she had worked toward since she was 9 years old and singing in a church choir in Busan with her grandmother watching from the second pew. She reads the entertainment blog coverage of the Kang signing and the studio updates and the single announcement and then the silence. The specific quality of corporate silence that falls when a label has decided something and does not intend to explain it. That is different from the silence of a delay or a setback that has a finality to it recognizable to anyone who has ever been on the receiving end of a decision made in a room they were not in. Min-Seo sits back in her chair. She looks at the ceiling of her small Seoul apartment, the familiar water stain in the corner, the light fixture she has been meaning to replace for 8 months, the ordinary and unchanging domestic geography of her life, which suddenly feels very thin between her and what she is holding in her hands. She reaches for her phone. She puts it back down. She is not ready to make this call yet, because making this call means saying out loud what she has found, and saying it out loud makes it real in a way that staring at a laptop screen at 2 a.m. can still, for a few more minutes, allow her to defer. She picks up her cold coffee. She holds it. She does not drink it. She looks back at the screen. She begins to read again. Scene 6. The studio session. She goes because the music pulls her there. This is the thing about Ari Washington that no heartbreak, no failed contract, no flight from Atlanta in the middle of the night with a suitcase and a specific form of exhaustion that goes all the way to the cellular level has managed to change. The music is always louder than the warning. It has been this way since she was 7 years old and found her grandmother's gospel records and understood, in the immediate and wordless way that children understand things that will organize their entire lives. That sound was the one language she would never have to translate, the one place where the full-dimensional fact of herself could be present without negotiation. The warning is real. She knows it is real. She is holding the contract in her bag as she steps out of the elevator on the 9th floor of the Kang Entertainment building on a Thursday morning, which is itself an answer to the question of whether knowing a thing is a trap is the same as being able to stay away from it. The studio is the most beautiful recording space she has ever stood in. She takes a moment at the threshold to simply register this, not as a professional assessment, but as a physical response, the way you pause at the entrance of any space that has been built with genuine and specific love for what it is meant to contain. The acoustic panels are covered in fabric the color of deep charcoal and arranged in patterns that manage sound the way hands manage water, directing it, shaping it, keeping it from bleeding where it should not go. The microphones are a curated collection, vintage RCA ribbons from the 1950s standing beside a contemporary Neumann large diaphragm condenser that costs more than Ari's first car, both of them suggesting, without any need for explanation, that whoever outfitted this space understood that different voices require different instruments to become fully themselves. The producer Sungwoo has assigned is a man named Hyun-jae, who is 34 years old and professionally warm in the particular calibrated way of someone who has spent a decade getting the best possible performances out of new artists without ever giving anything of himself away in the process. He smiles when she enters. He says her name with genuine enthusiasm for its sound. He offers her water and tea and asks about her vocal range with the specific combination of technical interest and personal attentiveness that makes her feel, briefly, like the most important person in the building, which is, she understands at the level of awareness, just below conscious thought, exactly what it is designed to make her feel. She accepts the tea. She asks to see the tracking setup. He shows her with pride, and the pride, at least, seems real. She puts on the headphones. They're the good kind, the kind that enclose the world entirely and leave only sound. She adjusts the microphone stand, bringing the head down a half-inch, angling it slightly to reduce the plosives she knows her lips produce on B and P sounds, a habit from years in studios with engineers who were not attentive enough to catch it themselves. She looks through the thick glass into the producer's booth, where Hyun-jae is making a note on his tablet, and she feels something she cannot name sitting at the bottom of her chest like a stone balanced at a precise and temporary angle. Not wrong. Not right. The specific frequency of a woman who is exactly where she has wanted to be for a very long time and is not certain she is permitted to want it from this particular source. She closes her eyes. She begins to sing. The Kang Entertainment studio, which has heard 10,000 songs in its recorded history, which has processed the voices of artists from 12 countries across 2 decades, which is owned by a man who considers voices assets and songs intellectual property and the particular quality of human emotional expression primarily in terms of its commercial viability, goes very quiet around her. The acoustic panels do their work. The vintage RCA ribbon microphone does what it was built across 70 years of refinement to do. And Ari's voice, warm and dark and reaching, the specific sound of a person who has turned every difficult thing that has ever happened to her into frequency and released it through her chest and her throat and her lips into the air, fills the studio the way light fills a room when you open the blinds on a morning that has been waiting for it. Scene 7. Ji-Hoon shows up. The door opens without a knock. This is how Ji-Hoon Kang enters rooms he has the legal right to enter, and as a Kang, the number of rooms in Seoul that qualify is considerable, and the Kang Entertainment studios are among the most unambiguously his of all of them. Carrying his family's name and his family's investment and his own 15 years of passive association with every square meter of space in this building. He does not knock. He does not announce himself. He opens the door at a controlled pace that is neither hurried nor casual, but has the specific quality of intention that makes it clear to everyone in the room, within the first 2 seconds of his presence, that his being here is not an accident and is not a request for permission. Hyun-jae sees him first. The change in the producer's body is immediate and physical, the shoulders lifting slightly, the hands going still on the mixing board, the practiced warmth of his professional demeanor reorganizing itself into something more careful and more distant, the way a thermometer drops when the room temperature changes. He says something in Korean, quietly, in the register of a man who is not certain whether he is in trouble and is proceeding with caution. Ji-Hoon does not respond. He does not look at the producer. He looks through the glass. He finds her immediately, which takes no effort at all, because she is the only person in the recording booth. Standing at the vintage microphone with her eyes closed and her head slightly tilted and one hand pressed flat against her sternum in the specific gesture of a woman who is not performing, but simply feeling. who is accessing something real and internal and entirely unguarded in the way that only happens when a singer believes no one is watching. Her natural curls catch the amber overhead lighting and hold it in a warm crown around her face. Her full lips are moving around words he cannot quite hear through the glass, the monitor audio reaching him through the booth speakers, but delayed, slightly removed from the living physical reality of her on the other side. He sits down in the empty chair in the corner, without responding to anything Hyunjae has said or not said or implied. He sits with his coat still on, his hands folded in his lap, his silver watch catching the edge of the monitor light, and he watches. This is a thing Ji-Hoon Kang does not do. He does not watch people without their knowledge. He does not enter rooms uninvited and then make himself comfortable in the corner of them. But he is here now, and she has not yet seen him. And the song she is singing is doing something to the quality of the air in the producer's booth that he did not anticipate and is not prepared to examine too closely or too quickly. She opens her eyes. The exact moment of it, the return from wherever she goes inside the music, the gentle re-entry into the physical world of the recording booth, and then her eyes move to the glass. She sees him. Something moves across her face in the first unguarded half-second. Surprise, recognition, and something more complicated underneath both of those things. A current of feeling too layered and too fast to name before her performer's training and her own considerable pride bring the surface of her expression back under her management. She does not stop the song. This is the thing. She finishes the line she is in the middle of, holds the final note of the phrase with the full authority of a woman who has never once abandoned a melody for a man in her life and does not intend to establish the habit now. Only after the line resolves, complete and perfect, does she lower the microphone a fraction and look through the glass at the man in the corner chair, who is looking back at her with his jaw set and his hands folded and the particular stillness of someone who has been caught doing something he did not know he was doing until the moment of being caught revealed it to him. Scene 8. Ari sings for him alone. The producer leaves eventually. A phone call real or engineered, it is impossible to say from outside, and Min-Seo would later say, when Ari tells her about this afternoon, that it does not particularly matter, because the effect is the same either way. He excuses himself in Korean with a gesture toward his phone and a brief apologetic smile, and the door to the corridor closes behind him with the soft, sealed sound of a soundproofed room returning to its own contained atmosphere. And then there is only the two of them, Ari in the recording booth and Ji-Hoon in the producer's chair, separated by a pane of glass and the full accumulated weight of every word they have not said to each other across every encounter that has brought them to this room on this afternoon in this building that one of them owns and the other entered with a contract in her bag she still hasn't signed. The silence between them is different from any of the silences that have preceded it. It is not the tense, guarded silence of the apartment, the first morning, the careful distance they maintained with the precision of two people aware of how easily it could collapse. It is not the electric, charged silence of the rainy Hongdae street, which was a silence with weather in it, with the particular pressure of the unexpected. This silence is softer. More dangerous than either of those for being softer. It has the quality of a room after the furniture has been moved, familiar dimensions, unfamiliar space, the sense that something that was taking up a great deal of room has been, at least temporarily, removed. She does not look at the sheet the producer left. She has not looked at it since he placed it on the music stand, the label's selected material, the demo tracks they want her voice on. The A&R vision of what Ari Washington should sound like filtered through Kang Entertainment's international market positioning. She adjusts the microphone. She closes her eyes for a moment, not for him, or not only for him, but for herself, for the internal calibration that is its own private ritual, the gathering of herself from the scattered geography of the last 72 hours. And then she begins to sing something else entirely. It is a song she has never sung for anyone. A fragment she started on a napkin somewhere over the Pacific on the flight to Seoul, when she was 35,000 feet above the water and still raw from everything she was leaving and not yet certain of anything she was approaching. She finished it in the margins of Min-Seo's notebook over a bowl of doenjang jjigae on her third morning in the city, writing the melody in the letters of words she was noting for other reasons, so that only she could read it back and know what she had done. It was never meant to leave her. It was the kind of song that exists in the category of private things, the ones you make not for an audience, but because you need to put something specific into a form that can be held outside yourself. Because the internal weight of it has become structural and load-bearing in a way that requires relief. Describe the song without its words, because the words belong to her. It has the shape of something that begins in loss and does not end in resolution, but ends instead in a kind of clear-eyed tenderness toward the loss itself. A song that has looked at the thing that broke it and decided, carefully and without sentimentality, to love it anyway. Because the alternative is to love nothing, and Ari Washington would sooner be broken than empty. It moves through the recording booth glass and into the producer's room the way certain kinds of light move through certain kinds of windows, changed in quality by the passage but not diminished. It moves through the monitor speakers and into the air of the room where Ji-Hoon Kang sits in the producer's chair, and it does the thing to him that he has spent 5 years learning to prevent anything from doing. Describe what happens to his face. Not a performance. Not the public architecture, the controlled blankness, the strategic distance, the particular arrangement of his features that he has worn so consistently in every room outside this one that it has become, to most people who know him, simply his face. What happens underneath it is different. Younger. Less certain. The scar near his right eyebrow catches a small crease as something in the muscles around his eyes releases, incrementally, in the way that ice releases, not dramatically, not at once, but by degree. Each degree imperceptible until the aggregate of them becomes unmistakable. His silver watch sits motionless on his wrist. His hands, folded, do not move. But something behind his eyes does, something that has not moved in a very long time, that had perhaps begun to assume it was permanent, now shifting slightly toward a window it did not remember was there. When the last note fades, the studio holds the silence between the end of something and the moment before anything else begins, which is its own kind of place, navigable only by the people inside it. Ari opens her eyes. She looks through the glass. He looks back. For minutes and 30 seconds have passed. Neither of them pretends, in this particular moment, in the amber and shadow of the studio on the 9th floor of the building that carries his family's name, that what just happened was simply music. Sungwoo's radar for his younger brother's location and state of mind so reliable that Ji-Hoon spent years of adolescence wondering whether it was surveillance or instinct before concluding it was both, and that in Sungwoo's case the distinction was academic. The corridor is empty except for them. The overhead lighting is the particular blue-white of late evening in an office building that has mostly gone home, and it falls on both of them without flattery, without warmth, in the impartial way of fluorescent light that has no investment in how either of them looks. Sungwoo puts a hand on Ji-Hoon's shoulder. The gesture is light, familiar. The gesture of a man who uses the vocabulary of affection the way an architect uses a load-bearing wall. Not for warmth, not for its own sake, but because it is structural, because it holds the shape of a thing that without it would show its actual form too plainly. Ji-Hoon does not move. He does not shift the shoulder. He accepts the hand the way he accepts most things Sungwoo offers, in complete outward stillness, in the internal posture of a man who has learned that resistance performed too visibly hands the other person information they should not have. Sungwoo speaks quietly. He always speaks quietly. Volume is for people who are not certain they will be obeyed, and Sungwoo Kang has never, in the 35 years of his professional and personal life, been uncertain of this. He speaks and the corridor holds the sound of it without echo, without resonance, in the flat and specific way of a space designed not to amplify anything. The shape of what he says, Without its exact words, he mentions the situation from 5 years ago. Not the woman, he never uses her name, and this, too, is a kind of violence, the refusal of personhood as a control mechanism. The way that making a person a situation rather than a name makes the moral weight of what was done to them more manageable from the inside. He describes the situation. He describes its outcome. He describes the lesson he expected Ji-Hoon to have absorbed from it, and the fact that recent behavior suggests the absorption was incomplete. He mentions the contract. He says it is progressing. He mentions that the American artist's voice is exceptionally marketable, rare in its combination of technical range and emotional authenticity. The kind of quality that Kang Entertainment has been unable to develop internally and has been waiting to acquire, and that it would be a significant loss to allow complications to arise before the asset could be properly developed and positioned. He does not specify what the complications might be. Sang-woo Kang has been having this category of conversation for 15 years, and he understands that specificity is the province of people who need to convince. He does not need to convince. He has never needed to convince. He states the perimeter. The understanding of what exists beyond the perimeter is left to the imagination of the person he is speaking to, because the imagination, well calibrated by evidence and history, will always construct something more persuasive than anything he could describe. Ji-Hoon stands in the corridor. His jaw is iron tight in the way that it gets when he is holding something that has no acceptable outlet, holding it through the muscles of his face, through the set of his shoulders, through the hands at his sides that are open and still and completely controlled. His silver watch catches the fluorescent corridor light in a thin, cold line. He looks at nothing. He looks at the wall across from him, which is pale and blank and offers him the specific mercy of being entirely without content, which is what he needs right now, a surface that requires nothing of him. That does not carry anyone's face or anyone's voice or the amber warmth of a recording booth where 40 minutes ago something happened that he does not yet have language for, but that sits in his chest in the place usually reserved for things he has already decided are beyond his capacity to manage safely. His brother pats his shoulder once, in the final gesture of a man who has said everything he needed to say and considers the conversation complete. He walks away. The corridor is empty. Ji-Hoon stands in it for a long moment, alone, in the blue-white light, in the climate-controlled quiet of a building that carries his name and in which, tonight, he is the loneliest person on any of its 42 floors. Scene 10. The Secret File. The name is Han Soo-yeon. She was 22 when Kang Entertainment signed her. She had a 3-octave range and a following of 40,000 people on a now-defunct platform and a producer who believed in her with the complete and uncomplicating faith of someone who had not yet learned that belief is not the same as protection. That loving a voice is not the same as being able to keep it safe inside a system designed to own and not to love. The producer was 24. He was new to the industry in the way that means technically present but not yet sufficiently cynical, still operating on the assumption that the family empire he was adjacent to was built on the same values it presented in its public materials. Still deferring to an older brother who called everything business and said it with such certainty that the alternative framework had not yet assembled itself in the younger man's understanding. Min-Seo finds this last piece at 2:47 in the morning in an archived entertainment blog that has not been updated since the year Han Soo-yeon went silent. It is the kind of website that still exists on the internet the way certain things exist in attics, not maintained, not visited. Not dead exactly, but existing in the specific suspended state of something that was once full of life and has simply been left as it was, sealed in the moment of its last update, uncatalogued and unloved and therefore, paradoxically, uncurated, which means unmanaged, which means that the information it contains has never been reviewed by a legal team whose job it is to review things and assess whether they should continue to exist in their current form. The blog post is a profile piece, written by a fan, detailed, affectionate, assembled from interviews and music show appearances, and the kind of close attention that only genuine fandom generates. The cataloging of a person in the period when they are at the beginning of something and everything they do is, to the people watching, a document of a future that has not yet arrived. The timeline is laid out with care. The signing announcement, the first studio photographs, the producer credit on the debut single, which is where Min-Seo stops, her cursor hovering over a name in a pull quote from an entertainment trade brief. A name she has come to know in the last several hours with the particular exhausting intimacy of a person who has been researching someone she did not expect to be researching. The producer credit. The debut single. The promising first release. And then the label silence, and the contract termination with no public statement, and Han Soo-yeon's single social media post 3 years later. And the 38 months between the end of her Kang contract and that post during which she does not appear in any public record at all, not music, not entertainment news, not social media. Not any of the ambient digital evidence that a 20-something woman in Seoul generates simply by existing in the contemporary world. Min-Seo reads the post to its end. She reads it again. She reads the section on the recording sessions, which describes the 9th floor studio in language that is recognizable, the acoustic panels, the vintage microphones, the particular quality of the silence in it. Because she has heard Ari describe a very similar room this evening, in a voice that was both cautious and lit from within, in the specific way Ari's voice gets when she is trying to be sensible about something she is already, at the level below sensible. Already decided. And then Min-Seo scrolls to the photograph. It is a studio photograph. Han Soo-yeon at the microphone, turned toward the camera with the microphone stand between her and the lens, her expression open and bright, and completely unguarded in the way of someone who has not yet learned that the camera is sometimes evidence. She is holding the headphones around her neck with both hands. She is smiling the smile of a 22-year-old woman who is exactly where she wants to be and has not yet been told how long the wanting will be permitted to continue. And there, at the right edge of the frame, partially cropped by a photographer who was focused on the subject and not the background, in a dark coat with his hands in his pockets and his face 3 years younger and the silver watch on his left wrist, catching the studio lighting in a thin bright line, Ji-Hoon Kang. Not passing through. Not incidental. Standing with the particular quality of presence of someone who belongs in the room, who is familiar to the room and to the woman in it, who is in this photograph because he was there at the beginning, because he knew her before it happened and was present for whatever the 18 months of silence contains and is not permitted, by the terms of documents sealed in court records, to describe. Min-Seo sits back in her chair. The cold blue light of the laptop screen falls on her face and the walls of her apartment and the coffee cup and the scattered papers. And the neon soul bleeds through the window behind her in the shifting colors of a city that is always somewhere between arrival and departure, always illuminated, always moving, always entirely indifferent to the particular weight of any given revelation happening inside any particular window on any particular night. She looks at the photograph. She looks at the silver watch. She looks at the face she has, over the course of this evening, come to understand as the face of a man who was inside a specific event that her best friend is now, in ways that Min-Seo cannot yet fully see, but can feel the shape of, standing at the beginning of. She picks up her phone. She holds it. She looks at the photograph one more time, the 22-year-old woman with her whole future in front of her, and the 24-year-old man at the edge of the frame with his hands in his pockets, and the studio, and the silence that came after it, and the sealed documents and the years of nothing and the single soft post that said she was grateful and she was leaving and she wished everyone well. Min-Seo puts her phone down on the desk. She puts her hand over her mouth. She sits in the cold blue dark and looks at the screen and understands, with the full and terrible clarity of a person who has been thorough enough to find the thing no one wanted found, exactly what she is holding. Ji-Hoon Kang was there. He knew Han Soo-yeon. He was present at the beginning and present through the middle and present, in whatever capacity his 24-year-old self understood how to be present, when the ending came. And somewhere across this city tonight, in an apartment where the Kang Entertainment contract is sitting on the nightstand unopened for the 6th consecutive hour, in the particular quiet of a woman trying to be sensible about a feeling that has stopped consulting her about its decisions. Her best friend is falling for a man who is standing at the center of a secret large enough to swallow them both whole and leave no evidence on the surface that anything went in. In Seoul, the past does not stay buried. It waits. Quietly, patiently, in old blog posts and sealed contracts and the edges of photographs, for the moment you are finally paying attention. End of episode 3.